That point too, about how not simple it is. We've talked about the feeling of love, that initial affinity that you have with someone.
Yeah.
What is the skill involved in love, and what's the skill? Because obviously, I think some people would say that love is not just a feeling, but it's also a skill that you have to learn. Is there a contradiction in that? How do you balance that contradiction in yourself?
Romantic love is essentially a giant web of incredibly deliberate actions that result from a feeling that you quite naturally feel out of no one's fault, but just you happen to meet the right person, hopefully. In that sense, I guess, like, it is a skill. It is a skill in the sense of, like, you have to learn. Part of the fun as well is that you learn what works with this person. You know, maybe some of your skill set quite simply just isn't needed here. And not needed in the sense of like it was worthless, just in the sense of like, well, you know, maybe those skills just, you could perhaps direct them at yourself rather than at somebody else, because they don't need you to burn that energy on them. And instead you can invest a different kind of energy into another kind of skill. And that art, like, ultimately it feeds into this idea of like loving somebody is an art form. It is. You know, your life is a canvas and you paint on it. If you're inviting somebody else to paint on your canvas as well, that's because two canvases are now one. Whatever picture you choose to make, that is entirely based on how well you can actually work with this person. You know, if the colors of your life don't really mix, who are you kidding? Is that really the picture you want to paint?
Let's zoom in on that picture then. What is it like what's some of the stuff that you had to, from that self-actualization journey, right, accept and then move on when you brought that other person to come and paint? What was some of the stuff, because for me, for example, right, I had to learn to let go of a lot of things, of a lot of control that I thought I had about my life, of a lot of ideas that I thought about how my routine would go. It was like a lot of allowing myself the space to find out new things about people. Sometimes it would just be something I would just fall and I'm like, oh my God, I'm falling. But it would also be an intentional kind of, I'm allowing this person into my life.
Yeah.
What was it like that? What was it like for you? And so what are some of the things that you realized about that process of letting go when it comes to relationships specifically, moving from that?
I would say that letting go is like, letting go, I agree with you, is very, very, very difficult. You know, if we're going to follow that logic of like, you know, the river of life, I suppose, letting go is like, imagine instead of going with the river and moving with change, you're clinging to reeds on the riverbank, trying to keep yourself where you are. The river continues to flow against you, and my God, is it not fucking tiring to hold on to those goddamn reeds? The fear is the free falling, really, you know, because like, let's face it, you're completely in the dark. It's a river, but you can't see fucking anything, so you have no idea when you get to come up for air. The fear is allowing yourself to be carried away by the current, knowing that you will continue to breathe regardless, because you are genuinely afraid of drowning. Letting go is just being able to let go of those reeds and trust that the current will take you where you need to go, and that you will respond accordingly to the challenges that life throws you. If you need to kick, start kicking, dude. Like, you're only going to hold yourself back. But you can also kick in the wrong direction, and that's also a problem. You know, a lot of people, when it comes to changing and the struggle to accept it in whatever form it takes, you know, the ending of a romantic relationship, for example, I guess, that's a big change. It's a scary change, and you're clinging to a lot of reeds, usually. In that sense, having the confidence in yourself to let go and trust that you will be able to continue alone without the need for these reeds or this other person, because their life course has now changed. Your rivers are no longer connected. Maybe they weren't for a long time and you were just in denial of that. But you have to have faith in yourself. And this is where self-actualization comes back into it. It's how well do you know yourself? You may have lost what you think you know yourself as during that time, during the time of those rivers converging. It can be very blinding. But you have to trust yourself in the sense that you will still be able to find yourself again, because you were never really lost. You just were no longer relying on yourself to keep everything afloat. That's the scary part, is that you have to trust that you'll be able to keep yourself afloat. Because you can. You always can. how you go about it matters though, because if you are really not going to help yourself, well, you might drown anyway. You know, like, it's hard. It's really hard. Like, change is violent sometimes, not always, you know, sometimes it's really nice. Like, now, recently, I've undergone a lot of change, I think. A lot of it was really violent as well. But, you know, I have faith in myself, man. That's really all I needed. It was tested a lot. But, you know, I trusted myself. And sure enough, just moving in my natural inclination made it incredibly easy to just invite someone to come back and paint the canvas with me again. Like, you just have to trust yourself.
If love is a skill, like you mentioned before, what are some of the skill sets that you look for in a partner now that you're going for? What are some of the skill sets that you look for in a partner?
I mean, well, this is, I suppose, an incredibly personal thing. It's literally different for everybody. I'm going to say pretty obvious things that everybody would go, yeah, of course. You know, like, I suppose, dependable, right? I don't mean like, oh, you know, carry me. I mean more like, just, I know I can rely on you, basically. But also, to be honest, I think okay, do you know what? You could strip it all back, completely, entirely. You could strip it entirely back. The only thing that I look for in somebody is, if I was to give myself over to you entirely, like myself, as in, you know, my life, like, just be very real about the fact that, like, look, cool, like, you know, if this is it, right? Equally, that, like, that's an equal sharing, you know, like, it's the willingness and, you know, the idea that, like, of course I just give myself over to this so naturally that, like, it's as if I've been doing this my entire life. I think that's where love is a skill. Is that, like, it looks skillful because when you're actually doing it naturally, people who have never done it naturally think it is a skill. It is not a skill. It's completely natural. Like, there are definitely aspects of it that become a skill, you know, like the ability to, what's the word, not converse, communicate. Communication is 100% a skill. Love is not a skill. Love is natural as fuck, you know, it's like moving to the beat of a song that you have quite literally been listening to your entire life. You just never really paid attention to until it actually hits you. And when it hits you in its entirety, you actually really process how amazing it truly is. But you can definitely hear similar sounds, and that's where it gets confusing. You know, I think that's, like, sort of where people end up in situations where, you know, they thought it was the correct thing, but actually you were lulled in by something that sounds similar, but just quite simply wasn't the right tone. That's okay too, though, you know?
On that point, I like it. You said that love is not a skill, communication is. I think that's very good. Like, I think that's something for people to remember. On that point, you mentioned about how people might think they found the right thing and then they don't. I think the reason for that is because, even looking at myself, is that you seek external validation instead of inner strength. And like you talked about self-actualization and stuff like that. Once you figured out that self-actualization and you figured out that inner strength, what is it like? Coming back to that communication thing, what is it like when you're breaking out of that shell into allowing people to come back into your life again? You mentioned it's just like, it's natural and it's, you know, all you do is just open yourself up to it. But that communication that you're talking about, what's some of the skill sets that it takes to be able to differentiate between those two, where you're not seeking external validation, but you're actually letting someone come in and paint that canvas with you?
This goes back to self-actualization again.
Okay.
So you were saying, like, how do you know when the risk is?
Yeah, how do you know when the risk, and how do you communicate that to the other person?
Okay. So communication as a skill is something that actually you can easily develop without the need to talk to another person at all, ironically. Talk to yourself, literally, like, but actually talk to yourself. you know, this I guess goes back to that whole like Freudian analysis of yourself thing I was talking about earlier. That is self-actualization, is learning how to communicate with yourself. Because when you can communicate very clearly and in a compassionate way, and that's the important part, is you have to communicate with yourself in a loving way, knowing that, of course you've got this, you are in your own hands. Who else's were you going to rely on? Like, it's all up to you, bro. You got to really trust yourself there. That kind of faith in yourself is really hard to get to. But again, it goes back to like moving towards what you're naturally inclined. Like, you know, when you're able to have very frank, honest, communicative conversations with yourself, you know, maybe you live in denial of aspects of yourself, dreams, sexuality, anything, gender. Finding peace with that is one of the hardest challenges of existence. Finding peace with yourself is the truly hardest thing to do, because it's something that changes constantly as well. You know, life is never stagnant, so it's trying to find that peace amidst the just actual psychotic drug trip that life is. You know, because you think it's fine, and then all of a sudden it's like, cool, well, here's a meteor, buddy. What are you going to do about that? Like, yeah, but you know, at the same time, once you're able to really communicate with yourself, communicating with other people becomes easy. Like, obviously, again, this goes continuously back to, it depends on who you have a natural affinity towards. You can't talk to everybody. Not everybody wants to be communicated with you, you know, for whatever reason. But, you know, those who do and just so naturally respond to your ability to communicate, well, it's because they have that same ability in themselves too. It's obviously different because they're not you, but like, it all is still just part of that puzzle, you know? Like,
I agree.
It's like, okay, being communicative with yourself, you can look at that as like gaining a very clear analysis of the colors of your life, the ones that you're able to paint with. If somebody else has that same awareness of what colors they have, you will immediately be able to see, the second you see each other, my colors complement yours. We can paint something really nice together. Maybe you might think, well, you know, not everything is exactly the right kind of color pigment, but hey, we can make it work, you know? Art is art at the end of the day. No, it's not. You can't force it. It's not. You know, it's, yeah, love is an art. In the same way as when you make your art, you definitely know when you're forcing yourself to make art, and you know when the pieces just ain't right. So who are you trying to kid? If you're abandoning an art project because you know, simply put, this ain't it, who are you kidding?